I always forget to press the button. I'm so sorry. Hey, welcome everybody to the RealAg Radio After Show. It was great to broadcast the show live here today. Some fantastic conversations. We heard from some great guests today on the program. Hope you're having yourself a great afternoon and everything is well. I actually haven't looked at the forecast today to see if Manitoba's getting more rain today. I hope not. And can give you an update here in Southern Alberta. No rain to be found as per usual. I want to mention that the After Show is brought to you by the Canadian Canola Growers Association, helping farmers succeed for nearly 40 years. Visit ccga.ca to learn more. It was we had a first-time guest today. It was great to chat with, well, actually a couple, because we've never had Lisa Ashton on before. But we also talked to Jim McCormick from Ag Market Net. And you know, it was interesting, if you saw corn and wheat today pulled back pretty significantly. Jim sort of alluded to the fact that a lot of that is, well, most of it is tied today to this assumption that Putin is going to cooperate on letting this Ukraine grain flow, and it's going to be able to be moved. And Jim provided his perspective that he's very skeptical of that he doesn't believe that is actually going to be the case, because we haven't got to the other component of the deal, which is what is Putin asking for. And so Jim McCormick from Ag Market Net basically said, you know, once we find out what that ask is and we realize that we probably don't agree with it, we move back higher from here. So these are pullbacks. Gives an interesting opportunity if you do believe in that narrative, that's the reality here of what we will see once Putin provides his ask on those ships being able to move that grain. What do you do when you have a pullback like this? Is this an opportunity to get involved in the option market? I'm not exactly sure, but it does present an opportunity probably for those funds that want to be on the long side of the equation. It's interesting. We have had a market analyst on the show every Wednesday the past 3 weeks. Okay. And what's interesting is that if you look at all three of those conversations, so we've had John Drager from Left Field, we've had Neil Townsend from Grain Fox, and today we had Jim McCormick from Ag Market Net. And they're all saying a very similar thing, creating a narrative, a story to why you should still be very bullish, even with these relatively high prices. And Jim really hit on it today in terms of the lack of planting progress in some states, where that target yield is going to be on that corn crop, and how tight that corn balance sheet actually might be at the end of the year. Presents a very, very tight story that will provide some opportunity for prices to go higher. We'll see who comes on next week. We've been based on your feedback, we've been bringing commodity analysts on every Wednesday to make sure we've got a routine here of having market insights. So we'll see who's next week's guest, and if they have a little bit of a different feeling on what is happening in this market. We also talked to Lisa Ashton, which I found very fascinating because there was some real practicality to this. This is in regards to a new report out from the Canadian Agri-Food Policy Institute talking about translating science to policy, approaches to increase soil carbon sequestration in Canada's croplands. And we talked about how this is no easy feat. There is no single silver bullet where we have one solution, we fix everything. The other component of this is the fact that there's multiple levels of wants and needs from depending on who the stakeholders are as well. And the fact that you have multiple ministries working on the file. So you have ECCC, Minister of Environment. You have obviously the Agriculture Minister working on this as well. And they may be in the same government, but their needs or their wants or what they feel is ideal or what should happen, they may not be on the same page. They might not be. They may not see eye to eye on everything. And so if you combine the ideological utopia that some people have around sequestering carbon and what the future should look like. You've got that ideological utopia, that desire, mixed with the scientific realities of the fact that there's so many geographical differences. Mother Nature is a huge factor in this. The crops you're growing have a huge factor in this. And a year to year in one area, based on the conditions that you face, your practices may be somewhat different. This is a tough one. This is not easy. So I found some of the takeaways in the CAPI study to be quite very, very fascinating in terms of identifying some of the barriers and how we have to focus on ROI. Everything cannot be around when we're talking about building carbon in the soil and carbon sequestration. It all can't, the convincing or the argument here can't just always be, hey, you know what, farmer XYZ, just do what's right. Like, it's about doing what's right. Well, what exactly does that mean? Especially when if you're sitting in Swift Current, Saskatchewan, you're in the middle of a terrible drought. What does doing the right thing mean? We have to talk more about when it comes to things like the ROI, the return on investment. It was interesting. I was having a conversation with a group where they're highly focused in this area of sustainability, but they had mentioned to me that what is missing entirely from the discussion about sustainability is ROI. And that's been lost. It's just, it's all about, what can we do better? What can we do different? What are we doing wrong? It's never about, here's some people that are doing some really good things in this area, and here's the return on investment they've got for their efforts. So that has been a real missing part. So I found it very fascinating that CAPI mentioned that as well in their report. How the heck is it the 1st of June? How did that happen? This year is just crazily going fast by. We are already in the 6th month of the year. Planting not complete, and I'm looking forward to the Farmer Rapid Fire tomorrow on RealAg Radio to get a real update on what has been happening with our farmers we'll be talking to. I know we have a farmer from Quebec, Ontario, Manitoba, and Alberta. So we haven't had Alberta on for a couple weeks, so I am really, really looking forward to that for sure. Today, the Bank of Canada raised interest rates. We got 50 basis points and also some relatively hawkish talk. There was a quote here, they will act more forcefully if needed. Interesting choice of words, forcefully. Also, on that note, on a day where Canada has raised interest rates by 50 basis points, south of the border, U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, one of the ringleaders to don't worry, inflation is transitory in this environment. She admitted that she is wrong in an interview on CNN. So we are only 25 basis points in Canada lower than where we were at the beginning of the pandemic. So we're almost back to the beginning, almost back to the start. Remember, there was an aggressive cutting of rates at the beginning of the pandemic to try to essentially save the economy, I guess is the way that we'll put that. And we have worked our way higher. And it does not appear whatsoever that the Bank of Canada or the Federal Reserve at this point is done. And this is an issue that the many central banks around the world are trying to figure out how to fight off, out of control inflation. And it is a huge, huge task. We also talked about the fact that the Ontario election is tomorrow. It's been a little bit of a ho-hum, kind of boring election. Is that the best way to put it? And we talked about some of the Abacus data was out with some new results. They had the PCs at 40%, the Liberals at 27%, the NDP at 22%, and the Greens at 4%. New Blue only at 4%. So not a lot of traction there for the New Blue Party, which is somebody may out there that's watching this may be able to correct me, but it's essentially kind of a more conservative version of the progressive conservatives. Maybe it is my understanding. Correct me if I have that description wrong. Really, after all of a pandemic, it is absolutely amazing to me that Premier Ford is only down 1%. And I'm not saying he did anything wrong. This has not been the trend that we've seen with other leaders that have come up for re-election. Look at Jason Kenney's fate and what he faced here in the last month. So Premier Ford has been able to hold his popularity through a very, very difficult political time. We'll see if tomorrow's election result proves to be any different. Farmer Schneck watching, also, of course, a big fan of The Agronomist. I know he tunes in on Monday nights. Rained out again here in Eastern Ontario. The feast or famine absolutely continues when we talk about this weather. It's absolutely amazing. Now, there are some gardens of Eden, so to speak, in different parts of the country, but it just seems like it. And I don't want to have like geographical bias here. In the areas though, like Manitoba, Eastern Ontario, where it's raining, and it's like whew, we're gonna rain. In the areas that are dry, can't buy a rain. And there is parts of Saskatchewan, of course, that are in the middle of that. Southwestern Ontario looks to be in pretty decent shape, provided they continue to get regular showers. But in some of these areas, Eastern Ontario, Manitoba, Eastern Saskatchewan, a lot of frustration building. I know Lindsay, that storm that I think Farmer Schneck's referring to, I think it went through where she is in Ottawa, real wrecking havoc during the lambing. So, it's Mother Nature. As Peter Johnson says, Mother Nature not being too motherly at all. When we did talk to Jim McCormick today from Ag Market Net, he referred to Putin and talking about that strategy and all that kind of stuff. I read it in the news and I thought it was interesting that the Pope said that he doesn't want wheat used as a weapon of war. He said the blocking of exports of wheat from Ukraine is very worrying because the lives of millions of people depend on it, especially in poorer countries. I make a heartfelt appeal so that every effort is made to resolve this problem. To guarantee the universal right to nutrition, please do not use wheat, a basic foodstuff, as a weapon of war. That is not surprised the Pope would say that. I would be mightily surprised if Mr. Putin was to take that advice or to listen or find some common ground. I think that would be shocking. Farmer Schneck says, we were fortunate enough to miss the damaging winds in that one. Yeah, there's been some crazy windstorms out in Ontario as well. Pete's been filling us in on that on the Monday show of RealAg Radio, where just crazy winds creating a lot of damage, and if you can avoid it, that is well served. And it's wind. Don't get me started on wind. I don't even look at the temperature. I just look at how hard the wind's gonna blow. But I know I was talking to Kelvin yesterday, and he's of course in Altona, Manitoba. I think they had like 3 inches yesterday or something like that. So it's the storms just keep on coming, which is why we heard from Jim today, McCormick, when he talked about how for some parts of the Dakotas, for example, they're just not going to get the corn in they intended to plant. So, you can't necessarily believe that corn planting progress number in some of those states because they're never going to get to the number that they originally had forecasted when it comes to some of that wet weather. So, if you're along the river there, it has just been. I'm not sure. We'll have to maybe hear from some people, but the ship may have sailed on being able to get much of that the crop in. Like I said, we will have a farmer on from Manitoba tomorrow. We'll see how he is making out. Maybe broke a record though. I think it was like 4 days last week in Manitoba where people could get the crop in, or they could be out there seeding, and we may have planted and seeded more acres in 4 days than ever in the history of the province. That's the one thing that's changed. And we've seen it in the U.S. and their ability to plant corn on a weekly basis. Same goes in Ontario. The old kind of how much corn or soybeans could get planted, or any crop for that matter, based on the size and the scale of the equipment now, it doesn't take a lot of time. You just need some time. You need a window. And the size of the machinery now, the technology that's available. Auto steer, I think, is a factor here too. The ability to run longer hours, get more done in a day. Some farms have the ability to go 24 hours because they're able to set up a shift if you've got some employees. There's a lot of things working in the favor of the farmer to get those acres planted and seeded as quickly as possible without having to drive 10 miles an hour down the field. That is a big thing that has changed here over recent years and time as technology and equipment has developed. I think it's a big, huge factor for sure. So as we enter June, we've got a lot planned with Real Agriculture. Coming up next Thursday, we've got a special Real Agriculture members only webinar that you can sign up for by going to realagriculture.com/webinar, and you can sign up for the webinar. We've got Robert Day, CEO of Ceres Global Ag, will be our guest. We're going to talk about the opportunity and the future of renewable diesel. Now, this is very applicable to growers in Western Canada with canola, growers in the U.S. with maybe canola or soybeans, and of course Eastern Canada as well. We have a lot of crush capacity in both soybeans and canola being intended to be built. It's all around renewable diesel. Now, that is not the same as biodiesel. It is different. What does all this mean, and why is everybody so excited? Ceres Global Ag is one of the companies that intends to build a crush facility. They're going to build it at Northgate, Saskatchewan, where they have already some handling facility there, but now they're going to put a crush plant there. That's the facility that ties into the BNSF from Canada, which is very unique in itself. Ceres Global has grain origination assets in both Canada and the U.S., so Bob has a very, very good handle on both markets. I've talked to Bob several times about renewable diesel. He is uber bullish about it. And there's legislative things happening in Canada and the U.S., states like California, where this is a big boost to canola demand and a potential significant way to diversify away from being subject to maybe some of the behaviors of a country like China. So I encourage you to tune in next Thursday, okay? What would that be? June 9th, I believe that is. And we will have Robert Day, CEO of Ceres Global Ag. Go to realagriculture.com/webinar to learn more about that. Okay, that's enough of me. I think I wrapped up the show good. I just cannot believe that we are at the beginning of June. It is flown by. And before you know it, we'll be like, hey, I can't believe it's already harvest. But the time is, I think some of the adversity has sort of sped up the calendar. But when you talk to farmers, they're like, I can't believe I'm not done planting yet, or I'm not done seeding. It feels like it's been going on forever. So it probably depends on where you're sitting and where your seed is in the industry. But hey, want to thank everybody for tuning in to the after show and enjoying RealAg Radio. If you did miss the live version of RealAg Radio, don't worry. You can download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And on Friday, Real Ag Politics, 2 o'clock Eastern, 12 o'clock Mountain. We got a great plethora of guests. We've got Tyler McCann and Kayla Morrison from CAPI talking about the report we discussed on the show today. We've got Tom Steve from Alberta Wheat and Barley Commission talking about the next Canadian Ag Policy Framework. And we'll also be joined by Deb Conlon of the GFO, the Grain Farmers of Ontario, to talk about the reaction to the election and what does it mean for agriculture in the province going forward. Hey, thanks everybody for getting real and getting connected with the Real Ag After Show. Have yourselves a great